Hello and welcome to the Crown Zone. I'm Lynn, and in this video I want to discuss the upcoming new moon in Scorpio. We're leaving Libra now, moving on 22nd into the sign of Scorpio, and our new moon will follow on the 1st of November. I think it's at 12:46, 47 in the UK. Obviously, depending on where you are in the world, it could be earlier or later than that. Now, all new moons are times of new beginnings, times of seed planting, of making intentions to seed forward into the future. And this is especially so with this moon. If you happen to be a Scorpio, or you have a heavy emphasis of Scorpio in your natal chart, then this is your new moon, and you won't get another one until the sun comes back into your sign. You will, however, be getting a full moon in April next year, 2025, but more of that in a moment. So this, particularly for Scorpios, a new time for setting intentions of looking ahead to time ahead. But actually, this moon is bigger than that because it signals a real new beginning and shift. The moon is in Scorpio, which is ruled by Pluto. And this is the last new moon that we will in our lifetime have while Pluto is in Capricorn, because on the 17th of November it moves into Aquarius and we begin a completely new phase there. Pluto has been moving through Capricorn for the past 15 years, breaking down old structures, demolishing, revolutionizing things, changing things, breaking them down in its very slow but inevitable way. And it is now very, very shortly going to change signs into Aquarius, and a whole new beginning happens there. So we have a new moon ruled by Pluto, which is the last moon for Pluto whilst it's in the sign of Capricorn, and which, in my view, is launching this new beginning, not only for Scorpios, but for all of us. So the new moon is the seed time of the new that is coming in, that which is going to be born, that which is being brought in, that is new. But for things to be new and be born, the old has to die, the old has to go. And no sign exemplifies this more than the sign of Scorpio. The season itself speaks volumes about this. It's very symbolic of all of this because the leaves, which have been glorious and multicolored during Libra's time, as we move into Scorpio, are blown off the trees and fall down and begin that process of decay, that process of going underground, of composting. And yes, that brings in a sense of things dying off. But there can be no new springtime growth without that process. It's an essential part of the cycle. And this is something that the sign of Scorpio is very conversant with. And it's certainly embedded in the nature of the season itself. And nature really can be your teacher on this. We look around us just at this time of year and we feel this process. And the season of mist and mellow fruitfulness, but also with the autumn, with this dying away, this falling off, there is often an inevitable sense of melancholy, an inevitable sense of loss, almost of grief, that the glorious summer days the mellow autumn days, they're gone, and the dark, cold, long winter, especially for us in the Northern Hemisphere, lies ahead of us. And so this can bring in a sense of loss, a sense of sadness. And in the same way, because the paradigms are shifting, because Pluto has been breaking down the old, there can be a sense of loss in that which must be released. There can be a sense of grief for that, because we're moving from what's familiar to what's unfamiliar. We're at the living edge of soul growth, and that can always be challenging, painful, difficult. But that is what we're looking at. But ultimately, there is no option here. We have to evolve, we have to awaken, we have to move forward, we have to upgrade. This is an inevitable process that we are in. And one way or another, it will happen. And it's in our best interests to make it happen easier rather than harder, so that these things can come to pass in the most straightforward way. Right. But maybe we've been resisting a little bit. Or maybe for we humans, these changes are not always so simple. And it's very interesting because we have a lot of planets which are retrograde. Now, Pluto is now moving direct. And as I've said, will be changing sign in the month of November. But at the point of the new moon, we still have Saturn, Neptune, Chiron, Uranus, and Jupiter moving in retrograde motion. Now, that is a lot of planets. And it's like they are going, they are, well, they are going back over old ground. Now, be sure you've got this. Be sure you've learned this. Be sure you're making these adaptations. Let's get this right. It's rather like we're in a remedial class with these retrograde planets, because they want us to take the graduation exam and get through. And it's like this attention to going back over old ground and come on now, get this right, get this sorted. And I think that is in many ways a blessing to us, and helpful for us. I'm very interested by the different approaches in astrology, which are almost as varied as astrologers themselves. And there's been a lot of talk, quite reasonably, about the Pluto Mars opposition. Now, this is something that's going to stick around for quite some time. Even when Pluto and Mars change signs, they will remain in opposition. This is a long running thing. And people have spoken about what a potentially explosive energy this is. It's a disruptive, potentially quite a violent energy. And certainly it can be seen that way. But as I said, the different approaches to astrology, all are valid, because there are so many ways to perceive things. But I think that for many of us, that people will be holding up the planetary positions as a mirror to the outer world. And there'll be much validity in that, and much that's correct in that. But there are a myriad ways of reading things, and we can also see the planets reflecting inwards into our own being and our own psychological journeys. And of course, there is the interplay between those two. But now, in many ways, Scorpio is a very strong sign. It is a sign which can stand its ground. It has endurance. it has strength. And so, in many ways, seeing the sun and the moon together in Scorpio, standing firm and taking up the challenge of the Pluto Mars square to them. This shows that the individual, that is possible to be standing in their power at this time. I'm also impressed by the fact that it is the sun and the moon that are there together. And it brings me back to the thing I'm always talking about, the divine masculine, the divine feminine. Both of them are challenged by Pluto's drive for evolution and growth. I think we can see Pluto as a need to evolve, and Mars as the actions that we're taking for those things to happen. And then the sun and moon, the masculine, the feminine, standing there together, both under pressure from this, but with strength, with an ability to stand. And certainly not standing alone. There are a lot of very helpful connections going on in this chart that I think really help us and really support us. But I wanted just to show the card. I think I've mentioned this before because I often bring cards into astrological readings. And according to the philosophies of the Golden Dawn, each of the tarot cards governs a decan on the zodiacal wheel. And this moon is happening at 9 degrees of Scorpio. And that's just towards the end of the first Scorpio decan. And the card which is associated with that decan is this. And this is the Five of Cups. And I think that I was talking about melancholy before, and I think that this speaks to that. It speaks to this sense of loss, perhaps even a sense of real despondency, and perhaps a tendency to be looking down only at what we've lost. Maybe even wallowing in that loss, or certainly feeling the deep emotions of it. I think that's something for us to just be mindful of. Now, we also have Mercury. It's not right with the sun and moon, but Mercury is in Scorpio at this time. And it's connected in lots of useful ways with Mars and with Pluto and with other planets too. So let me get this straight. Mercury in Scorpio is very penetrating. It's a very investigative, deep diving kind of Mercury. It will keep turning things over until it burrows down to the essence of things. And also can concern itself with dark matters when needed to. It can explore and trawl the depths and bring things up there. And in many ways, it's quite a detective kind of Mercury. That, I think, helps us here. It helps us in being able to see more clearly and also communicate, because Mercury is that planet which is the messenger between all the other planets. It's the way that the communication system. And it's forming some helpful aspects here. So this new moon is flagging up for us what must die in order for the new to be birthed in, to come in. And Dark Lord Pluto, you'll recall, is Lord of the underworld, Lord of the realm of death, but also where great treasures are. And There is only one other god which Pluto ever allowed into the underworld. Only one. And that god is Mercury. So Mercury and Mercury alone is allowed into the subconscious, the underworld, and is able to navigate that territory, often through the power of bringing things up consciously into conscious awareness, and being able to formulate things. And that is the function that Mercury can have. In psychology, early psychology, the people talked about the talking cure, talking things through, and this idea of Mercury going down into the depths and then coming back and communicating those things. So this is a very important role, I think, that Mercury is playing playing for us at this time. Now, there is another myth that is very aligned to Pluto, and that is the story of Demeter and her daughter Persephone, who is abducted by Pluto and taken into the underworld. Now, we Demeter and Ceres are one and the same, and we have asteroid Ceres also in Capricorn at the moment, and she is traveling with Pluto. They're not exactly together, but they're traveling together as a pair, and of course their stories are very bound up in each other. And one of the functions that Ceres can hold for us is in nurturing us through our griefs, because she lost her daughter to Pluto. She got her back for half of the year eventually, and so experienced profound grief about that. And so there is the sense with Ceres of understanding this grieving process that we're going through, but also providing that nurturing to us, that care, holding that space for us, which will help us as we go through these inevitable transformations. Because just as Persephone couldn't remain a little girl forever with her mother, she had to move from innocence or ignorance, if you like, into the world of experience. So now Pluto is demanding our transformation, demanding our growing up process, actually. And some of that can only happen through experience. Pluto is looking kindly on Mercury. They're in sextile, which is an aspect denoting a need for useful actions. So that's good. And also, Mars is trining Mercury. And again, there's Mars and Pluto, the bugbear that we're talking about, everyone's concerned about, but they're forming very helpful aspects with Mercury. Uranus, the awakener, is opposite Mercury, in opposition. And certainly, there have been a lot of shocking wake up calls and shocking revelations that we've had to process, things that we found out about which have been far from pleasant, that have been going on with public figures in the world, different scandals of all sorts. And there's been a sense of disillusionment there, I think. This sense of disillusionment with what we thought we could trust, that seemed to have stood for centuries, suddenly, feet of clay. Things are crumbling, things are not as they seem. And we've been waking up to that quite a lot. But also, I think when we're looking at Uranus and we're looking at Mercury, we have Mercury, which is the more factual intellect. And then we can also see Uranus as cosmic mind. It's a higher octave of Mercury. And so we could view this as real insights coming in, and a heightened awareness there of things. So that also could be a very useful energy there. So, in many ways, Uranus, doors of perception opening. And I think we do need new perceptions at this time. And that's what we're trying to seed into the future with this very active Mercury here. Are those fresh perceptions which will take us forward? One of the aspects of Scorpio that um, is perhaps not so desirable is a propensity at times for a deep suspicion. And at its worst, this can be a little bit of paranoia and perceiving the motives of others as a threat when perhaps they're not. So I think the whole notion of perception and keeping perception clear is very, very important at this time. To be able to stand in the best aspects of Scorpio's strength, determination, endurance, selfhood, ability to be self sustaining, all of those sterling qualities are the ones that we should be looking at, not resentments or victimhood or paranoia. Those would not be less desirable at this time. So, things there that we should guard against. In terms of the planets and the aspects they're making, there's more and more that could be said about the chart of this new moon. But there comes a point when I think there's sufficient layer of complexity, and we can go into mind boggle, to be honest, by adding more and more and more layers. I think probably enough sufficiency has been set down with this talk, which is already, in excess of 20 minutes. So let me then sum up, if you like, my own take on this moon. I see it very future orientated, and I see it pointing to a better time ahead, seeding a better time ahead. Which is not to say that we're not in times of difficulty and challenge, because we are, but that things are moving and they are changing, and we can awaken in a better future here. So I said, didn't I, earlier, that the Scorpio full moon will be in April when the sun is in Taurus. So we'll be really revisiting the themes that are being seeded now in April, in the spring. And obviously, that's a time of rebirth. That's a time of fecundity. It's a time of nature burgeoning. So we'll be in a very different space then. And I'm hopeful that by then, we will be seeing even more seeds of hope that are there. I think I'd like to end this video by returning to the sign of Scorpio, where our moon is for this new moon. There's a myth of Scorpios, there's a symbolism of Scorpio, which I haven't touched on yet today, but which I think it's really useful to mention here. And this is the myth of the phoenix bird. And the phoenix is able to rise from the destruction of the fire. into new life and rebirth. And this is very much a symbol of the deeper nature of Scorpio, the deeper nature of that underpins, if you like, all of the cycles of death and rebirth that we experience here. And I do think that from these challenging experiences, we will be rising like the phoenix from the ashes, and that a better future is ahead of us there. So I will leave you with that thought and catch up with you next time. Thank you very much for listening to this and staying with me. Bye bye.